there's much conversation going on at the moment about the top of the game and is it too easy? Should we roll back? What should be done to save modern golf courses or the historic golf courses that we still want them to play? So we've got Pro V1 versus Tour Bellata, and this is a 30-year-old golf ball. How much difference really does it make? And let's also compare Persimmon versus modern as well. So first things first, let's talk a little bit about the construction of the golf ball and how they differ. So the Pro V1, really modern materials. It's actually a high gradient core. So ultimately, it's a solid core which is softer in the middle and gets progressively firmer as it goes to the outsides of it. So it's a large, firm, essentially, core that's designed to load at different stages to optimize performance at different speeds it's hit at. So the harder speed it's hit, it's designed to spin less and activate the middle of the core, and as it's hit a little bit softer with the irons, essentially it's designed not to squash quite as much and to optimize spin control rather than just distance. And there's then a mantle layer around the outside of that core, and then the cover on top of it, a soft cast urethane cover which provides lots of grip, lots of durability, lots of spin with the wedges. We then move to the Tour Bellata, which has a much smaller but liquid core, which actually was corn syrup. People used to think it was something really toxic, but ultimately that was to stop you digging into it and finding out what it was and hurting yourself by getting it spraying in your eye. So it's got that soft liquid core, which is then wrapped in basically very, very long elastic band. So it's a long elastic kind of wrap covering, so a bit like one of those elastic band balls that you put together. That's essentially what's outside of that center. And then we've got the casing and cover on top of that, which again, soft, very soft and elastic and stretchy. So loads of spin, absolutely knackerall durability though. Those that used to play with these remember, avoid a bunker, because the moment you go to a bunker, you put a smile on it and it's useless. The other aspect, dimple patterns. The dimple patterns change to optimize aerodynamic stability and wind. It's a much more complex pattern, higher percentage of coverage of dimple as well, which then leads to greater aerodynamic performance, whereas there are more flat spots on this, which makes it a little less stable as well, which is actually one of the things that a lot of people talk about when they talk about the ball rollback, things we'd like to see to destabilize the ball on mishits. So something that in kind of varying conditions, Bellata is much less stable than the Pro V1. So what we're going to do is hit some of the 6-iron. Now, I play a bladed 6-iron. So what I don't need to do with the 6-iron, I don't need to compare it to a club from the 90s because there is no tech advantage. It's a blade, there's no tungsten in it, it's just a solid lump of metal. So I'm going to test both balls with my 6-iron, and then we're going to move to driver where we're going to hit different constructions, and we'll talk more about that just before we hit those. So let's see what difference the ball makes with an iron. So what we're going to do is going to benchmark with some shots of the Pro V, get 4 or 5 of the Pro V, switch to the Bellata. So we all know what the Pro V does. It's a lower spin ball. So in principle, we're going to see the greatest difference between these two. My standard 6-iron here. So we're very familiar with the numbers we're looking to get out of this. So should be seeing launch angle, 15, 16 degrees for me, and then around the high 4000s, 4.7, 4.8 on spin. That's what I'm looking to achieve. My normal distance, 180 to 185 when I'm warmed up. And it's got that very familiar sound off the face. Familiar kind of little bit of a click, sounds fast off the face. It's what we now describe as a soft feeling golf ball. However, when we go to compare with the Bellata, certainly isn't going to sound soft compared to that, but ultimately softer core, softer cover, more control, but ultimately these are still fast golf balls with plenty of stability. So one of the things that we really do see is that ball holds its shot shape really, really comfortably. So you've got a few shots there that are within a couple of yards of one another, similar shots. We all know what to expect from the Pro V1, but that gives us our benchmark. So I'll switch over to the old boy, the Bellata. So, first things first, it almost looks a slightly smaller golf ball, which is a little bit to do with the colour of it. It's a slightly less, now they're an old golf ball, 25 years old. But the colour of the current balls is so much brighter, the paintwork itself. And the other thing that's noticeable is the evenness of the dimple pattern. It's much more of an irregular pattern on the Pro V1. So it has a very, very different look. But we're 180 odd with the Pro V1. Where does this put us? Well, number one, it's a totally different acoustic off the head, much softer, which ultimately the compression of the ball, the core itself is a totally different material, so it's a much softer sound. So one of the things that going from back in the day, playing these balls, durability was an issue, but going between this and say a distance ball was a massive difference. Whereas actually now almost the premium balls are a little bit firmer because the core is that little bit more solid. It's actually in a distance ball now, it's a softer core, ironically. But these balls were such a long way from the old, you might think of an old Molitor or something like that, was an absolute pebble. These things were soft as anything. So such a different note off the face. You really almost barely feel it when it's hit. So it's a totally different note and a totally different feel. And it's totally different data as well. So get another couple and then we'll run you through the numbers. So, don't think we need to show all the shots, but the summary I think shows enough of the difference here. So we focus on the Pro V1 data, the stuff we know and we've seen week in, week out from these videos. For me here, I prefer a slightly stronger flight. 15 launch, 4748. In terms of spin, we're still around the 45 land angle, 90 feet mark from a height land angle point of view. So, strong-ish, but still plenty of control. 142 efficiency. So, good contacts there. Now I've gone up half a mile an hour or so in club speed with the Bellata, but ball speed's down 3 and a bit miles an hour, so efficiency wise is way less. So it just doesn't come off the face as fast, so that's part of where there's a distance loss. But then we just look at that launch and spin difference. So we've lost 10% of launch pretty much, just under 1.5 degrees of launch. But the spin's gone up almost 1,500 revs, 1,460 revs. Or sorry, 1,360 revs. So it's a big jump in spin. And what that does, lower launch, higher spin, that's 15 yards less. So 3 miles an hour in ball speed, you're looking at about half a club, all else being equal. But that launch and spin differential has just killed yardage. So those of you that haven't ever played a Bellata might hear people my age or older talking about that low launch rising ball flight they used to see, that kind of swooping flight. This is why the spin was so much higher and that launch angle lower. You had to launch it low to control the spin in the flight, but that's where there was that kind of swooping, kind of almost like airplane taking off kind of launch pad effect. But you had to get that, otherwise it was just going to the moon and back. So angle of attack the same, path very neutral, face angle basically the same. It's 10 foot lower. It's almost landing as steep, but if I put it on the dispersion pattern, a club and a half shorter. So big difference there. So just clubbing wise, it's the same club, but there's no loft difference. It's just the ball. We're already looking at a club and a half more into the greens, much less stable in wind. Really big difference in how you got to play with this. So let's see, going up to the woods, what does it do there? So in the woods, we've got a few more layers to add on to this. So on the irons, because I play a blade, I wasn't going to compare against an old blade because lofts would have been different. Quite different here. So what do we have here? We've got titanium face, thinner, lighter materials, weight distribution optimized for stability off center, thick, thin on the face to optimize ball speed across the face, stiffer framing to reflect the energy straight back into the face to get back into the ball. You've got all sorts of things going on with this. Graphite shaft, 45 grams heavier, and a solid lump of wood. That's it. A little bit of bulge and roll. So loft-wise, this measures 10.2, and this measures 9.8 actual loft. So lofts are very similar. That's about where it ends. So when we add this in, going to hit both with both balls, then we can extrapolate out across a whole hole how much difference we're looking at from a yardage point of view and how different these things really are. So like we did first time around, we're going to benchmark with modern tech, modern head, modern ball. Then we'll switch the Bellata, then we'll switch the Persimmon and hit both as well. So again, these are all things that we know how these perform, very stable across the face. Really light and easy to swing and generate speed, really all about creating distance, strong spin rate, 149 efficiency. So there's plenty of speed being achieved with these, and there's plenty of margin of error. So part of that speed is the ball's fast, the head's fast, but the margin of error allows me to create speed and miss it and still get away with it. So there are a few elements that all cumulatively have allowed us to basically hit the ball a darn sight harder. You know, add to that was a little low on the face, but it still maintained decent ball speed. But add to that, the players are now more athletic. Again, it's a cumulative effect. The ball's more stable through the air, the heads are more forgiving, so they allow the player to develop more speed and hit it harder and get away with more. So that facilitates adding on, and facilitates that kind of snowball effect of faster, faster. Well, maybe not this body being faster, but the players now are much quicker than they used to be because they're all athletes. So, you know, one thing feeds the other. The ball change feeds the driver head design change. The driver head design change feeds the players change in terms of swing technique and speed. And ultimately being able to put that bit of extra effort in and get away with it. So, you know, that's Pro V1. We'll switch to the Bellata. We'll get a comparison. Right, so everything the same apart from the ball. So probably be less of a difference on the sound than we got with the iron. Yeah, so we still got the hollowed out head, so we get that note off the club head that almost that tingy note, which is, you know, something that we're all used to, rather than the solid lump of metal that was on the iron, where the note off the ball is accentuated a little bit more. So interesting enough, straight away we're seeing a little bit more sideways movement. You know, and that's something that the balls, the grip of the face, created a little bit more side spin, created a little bit more shape. So that dimple pattern, dimple coverage, the aerodynamics of the modern ball holds that ball a lot more stable. All right, so I'll give this a little extra on the last one. So, given that full treatment, let's have a little look at how this one affects the numbers. So, got the data here. Now, brief disclaimer, we had to hit a couple off camera because the TrackMan, we had to have particular lighting to pick up some of the shots with the Bellata. So there are a couple of shots on here that you won't have seen me hit, but all relevant. So what can we see straight away? So looking at the Pro V1 numbers first, we've got 149 efficiency, strong flight, strong spin, kind of a lower going ball flight, but you're really kind of from a total distance maximizing that kind of run out and lower spin and forward momentum. So you're on 149 efficiency, getting me 157 ball speed. So into the Bellata, well, marginally lower club head speed there, but we've dropped 7 miles an hour ball speed. So efficiency from 149 down to 144. So a significant drop off in ball speed off the club face. Interestingly, a little bit of a higher launch, but spin rate, again, we're looking at 1200 revs of spin higher. So that's over 50% more spin than the Pro V1 had, or you could look at the Pro V1's under 2/3 of the spin of the Bellata. So that spin again, 7 miles an hour ball speed, you're looking at 12 to 15 yards, but add that spin on again, it totally kills it. So we've gone from average of 286 to 259. So that's another 27 yards lost. So if you're looking at that sort of total loss, if we're hitting driver 6-iron, with a Bellata versus the modern day golf ball, you're looking at 15, 16 yards for the iron shot, 25 odd for the driver, 40 yards difference. And that's just the golf ball difference. So quite an incredible drop off in distance. And if I put that onto the screen on the dispersion pattern, again, we can see how those Pro V1s stretch that yardage out. And the longest one, up here, if we look at the, if I actually bring on the data from that shot, you've got 295, 296 out of the longest shot with the Pro V1, and we're down at 265. So it's 30 odd yards, and considering club speed's only 1 mile an hour difference, that's a massive drop off, or gain, you could argue, for the newer ball versus the old Bellata. Let's add this one in now. Right, so a few things going on here. Now we've gone from a 64 gram shaft to a 100 odd gram shaft. And that in itself means we've got to swing it a little bit differently. But this is using equipment that was used back in the day. You go back to any of the major winners in the 90s or earlier using Persimmon, they were not using a graphite shaft. So hence the swing had to be a little bit different. I know, having done these sort of tests before, I can't swing it the same because of that extra dead weight. I've got to swing much more on my core and actually get everything coming together. If I go with my lower body, it snaps and leaves the club behind. So that's going to have an effect. And there's a lot less real estate of club head here. So slightly off center, it's so much less stable. There's much less in terms of the current head to go all the weight around the outside. And this one's just got a little bitty bit of weight either side of the strike point. But there's nothing stopping this head deflecting on a miss hit. So I'm going to try and give it as much as I can, but that's sort of where, again, the game was a little different because you couldn't really get away with it because of the side spin on the ball, and actually couldn't get away with a miss hit. So someone like Greg Norman back in the day had a massive advantage for being an exceptionally good ball striker with the driver, that allowed him to put speed in and be long, but he was accurate with it as well. So he was able to have a massive advantage over the rest of the field, which was basically negated when the metalwoods came along. So start off with the Pro V1, get a few with this, get the comparison with the Bellatas. Goodness knows how much distance we're going to lose with this one, but let's give it a go. So straight away getting that club through the ball, I've got to be really conscious of staying connected and timing it. I can't just go absolutely wild at this. Got to go a lower tee because it's a smaller head, hence not having that higher peak tee. But if I go hell for leather at this, I'm going to lose my timing. So I've got to make sure that I'm really well connected through the ball. And then it makes you very, very conscious of how little the centre is of this, how small the sweet spot is on this club and how little margin of error I've got, because that felt horrible. That one felt good. So I actually got that one away. That felt a really kind of solid contact. It's amazing, even this ball, the different sound. I know it's a completely different material, so it's going to have totally different acoustics. There's something quite nice about it. He says when I'm in the warm, I wouldn't mind this on a cold winter's day. That would be a pretty miserable round of golf. Let's see if I can get a bit more into this one. Just come out of balance. So I'm going to do one more. I'm going to tone it back a little bit. Don't want to compare rotten data with this. So let's give it one more, trying to be as positive as I can be. God, it's hard work that with this much weight. Right, onto the Bellata. Okay, so we know from the irons and the driver that we hit before the data difference on this. Now these are the two originals, so it'd be fascinating to see when we compare Pro V1 and TSR3 driver with Bellata and this. That will be quite sobering, I think, but do these to go together like whatever the rhyme is, something and honey, but we shall find out. Oh, it's such a different sound. Almost sort of waited for it rather than actually getting on with it. But yeah, it's almost like hitting a bouncy ball in terms of the note off the face. The head's obviously a totally different note, being just a solid lump of wood with a couple of screws in, and then the softness of the ball as well. When you go to this, ultimately it's a different game. It's swings differently. I've got to move differently to get control of it. I mean, you almost don't feel it. It's that soft. I mean, it's incredible different sensation to hit with, as we'll see in a minute. Incredibly different result. So quite an interesting difference going to the Persimmon head in terms of how little difference in terms of spin and flight profile versus the hollow construction of the TSR3. So we're looking at actually a very similar ball speed differential. With the Pro V1 just under 150, 149.8 on average, and 143 with the Bellata. So we had a 7 mile an hour drop off with the TSR, and we've got basically a 7 mile an hour drop off with the Persimmon as well, based on the ball. But that's where the similarities are at their biggest. So we've got a degree of launch angle, but the spin's only 10% difference. It's about 350 revs difference. So a much smaller gap than the 1200 revs we saw with the TSR3. So what does that actually mean from a distance point of view? Well, it's the ball speed which is the primary loss of distance. So we've got a 20-yard differential rather than a 25. Now actually it's actually stretched out a little bit more. The variations with the Bellata are a little bit more, and that's probably where that average has dropped off a little bit. But the flight profile is way more consistent out of the solid head between the two golf balls. And that's really where you look at, for example, what's the head done, what's the ball done? Well, actually the hollow construction on the driver head actually ruins the performance with the Bellata. Whereas actually with this one, we can actually still get pretty good numbers. It does spin the ball a little bit more. We have got a little bit more backspin, so we're seeing, relative to ball speed, a bit of a shortening with distance off that head. But ball speed wise, we're not really losing much from a solid hit. So we put that onto the dispersion pattern here. We can see, okay, the blue numbers here are with the Persimmon and the Bellata. So there is one that we had a little bit of a miss with, which has dropped way back. But actually, if I put it on the data, longest hit with the Persimmon and Bellata at 250, let's call it 254, it's rounded up. And then longest hit with the Persimmon and the Pro V1, 266. There's only like 12 or 13 yards gap there. Ball speed wise, we're looking at that sort of, where are we here? So it's about a 5 mile an hour differential there. So actually, hence there's that 10, 12 yard gap, a little bit of spin, actually kind of relevant hit to relevant hit. That's really narrowed up. But then, the variability with the Persimmon and the Bellata, you've got a wider variable on both. So, the drop off, if you slightly miss one, really drops off. Doesn't happen so much with the Pro V1. So, essentially what we have with Persimmon and Bellata is basically zero margin of error. And out the head on the TSR3, we've got a big margin of error on the head, but the ball flares up and down a little bit more. So, really interesting seeing the little nuances between the different head styles of how much that spin differential changes versus the actual, launch and spin versus a solid head. But ball speed, there's a big drop off. So if you go back to the question we posed at the beginning, rollback side of things, something really being talked about. With that data, if we rolled them back to the Bellata, then how much distance is really being made? So actually, if you take just the ball itself, 30 yards with the driver and 11, 12 on the 6-iron, that's 40, 42 yards per hole if you're hitting a driver and a mid-iron. Well, that's pretty big. And if you factor the distance they're now playing shots, I mean, look at Augusta that's coming up shortly. It might have just been by the time this video comes out. How many new tees we're seeing built there, the 13th, where they're having to buy all this land up. You just think the savings that they would make from a course maintenance point of view, if you just went back to this ball. Now they'd have to ramp up production again, so the cost is then eaten up there. But actually, 40 yards a hole, if you take par 4s and par 5s, we've generally got 14 of them. You're then looking at that's 600 odd yards per golf course. That's a pretty big change. Now factor in, it's never going to happen. But if they went back to this old thing, now we're looking at 50 to 55 yards per hole. That extra 10 to 15 yards that driver head makes in terms of ball speed and distance. So all of a sudden, get 14, 15, of those kind of at least 2 shotters at 50 yards a hole. Now we're looking at 700 odd yards, and that's at my speed, let alone the Tour Pros. So, there's the masochist in me that says, what? Actually, the game was harder with this equipment. You had to be more exacting. You could miss more. But was it more fun? Maybe not. Would we like to see them using this stuff again? Oh, you could get one on the calendar somewhere. See who the best golfer really is of maneuvering this golf ball around. That'd be fascinating to see. Maybe not something I want to do week in, week out though.